If you want to build a website in Python, then you're in the right place. Now, Python offers some incredibly powerful yet beginner-friendly frameworks that can get you from zero to a live website in literally just a few minutes. Now, today I'm covering the 3 easiest ways to build websites with Python, and that includes Streamlit for data apps and prototypes, Flask for lightweight web applications, and Django for fully featured websites. Now, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which framework fits your project and how to get started with each one, as I'm going to give you a super fast code demo so you can see what they look like. Anyways, let's dive into it and start with Streamlit. Now, Streamlit is by far the easiest way to make a website in Python, and it's a massive game changer because you don't need to know HTML and CSS. Streamlit allows you to write only Python code, literally pure Python code, and have a fully functioning website, and it comes with a ton of built-in components that make it very easy to do this. Now, that said, Streamlit is best used for data science and AI-related applications. It's typically very good for building fast demos or interacting with LLMs or, for example, showing chart data or images. It's not necessarily the best when it comes to features like authentication, for example, or fully fledged websites that you'd want millions of people to be using. The way that Streamlit works is you simply write a Python script, and then that Python script gets executed tons of times in the web to actually render the website and then deal with any of the dynamic data changes. Now, this is a little bit of a weird framework. It's very different from other web frameworks like React, for example, or Django, or Flask, and I want to hop over to the computer here to show you what it looks like. Keep in mind, this is really designed for data science and AI-related apps and building quick prototypes. All right, so I'm on the computer now, and I'm going to give you a quick code demo of what a Streamlit application looks like. Now, first, this is the application that I built. It's just a simple to-do app because I know a lot of you are familiar with making those. Now, you can see here that I can do something like, go to the park or something and add this as a low priority item, and it gets added down here. I can do something like maybe, let's clear this, clean my room. Let's spell my correctly. Let's change this to high, add that to my to-do list, and you can see that now the kind of priority shows up. If I want, I can check one of these off as completed, or I can restart it, and you can see that it kind of refreshes the page here, and it updates the statistics below. Then I can delete one of the items if I want to, and that's pretty much all the functionality that I built. Now, sure, this is pretty basic, but normally in order to build an application like this, you would need to know some HTML and CSS, because you need to actually build this user interface that you're seeing. But I want to show you that in Streamlit, you don't need to know any of that. You can do this in pure Python. So I installed the Streamlit library, which I did by just running the pip install Streamlit command. And then from here, this 100 and 15 lines of code is that entire site. So have a look at this here. I import Streamlit as st. Then I can set the page configuration with a line as simple as this. So if I go here, you can see that we've kind of set the icon and we've set the title by simply running this, right? This command. Then I'm able to handle things like state on my site, so I don't need to refresh the site if I want to store data persistently. And then you can see here that if I want to render something, I simply just write st dot whatever I want to render. So in this case, I want to render markdown to the screen, and then I just put the markdown code, or in this case, it was HTML, that I want to show. If I want to render something else, like a text input box, it's as easy as this, st.textInput. If I want to create a form, I do a form like this. If I want a select box or a form to submit button, it's as easy as this. And if I want to check if the user pressed the button, I can just say if submitted, so the name of my button here, and then I can check, for example, the input and make sure that they actually type something. I'm not going to go through a full tutorial of Streamlit here, but I'm just trying to show you that it's very intuitive and easy to make these user interfaces, but the websites can become a little bit difficult to follow when they get much larger. So that's why I really like Streamlit for quick demos, small prototypes, things related to data, viewing charts, etc., because it's very fast to spin up these sites, but it just can be a little bit unintuitive when you're building something super large. If you want to learn more about Streamlit, I have an entire course on it, so I'll leave that on screen. But now let's move over to the next framework. Now, quick pause here because we're talking about websites. If you don't have a reliable platform to host your website on, that means your code is pretty much going to waste. Now, I've tried a bunch of hosting providers over the years, but none of them seem to deliver on what they were promising. That's until I found SiteGround. Now, first off, they're built on Google Cloud infrastructure, which means it's perfect for heavy custom-built websites. On top of that, they have a suite of built-in speed and security features like CDN, multi-level caching, DDoS prevention, WAF, geo-distributed daily backups, and much more. And for us developers, they've got staging environments with one-click deployments. This means you can test all of your code changes safely before you push them live, which means no more breaking your production site because you forgot to test something, which is something I've done many, many times. Plus, they've got Git integration, WordPress CLI, SSH access, and all the tools that we actually use. And speaking of which, their Site Tools control panel is way cleaner than cPanel, and it's honestly perfect for multi-site management where you can easily switch from one site to another. So if you're tired of sluggish hosting or you want those developer features, then check out SiteGround, who kindly sponsored this video. I'll drop a link in the description because they've got plans starting at just $2.99 per month. Now, trust me, your future self will thank you when your sites are actually fast and secure and you don't need to keep changing providers. So now we're moving on to Flask. Now, this is a minimalist framework that's perfect when you want more control over your web application. Now, Flask follows the philosophy of micro. It gives you the essential tools to build web apps without overwhelming you with features that you might not need. So Flask is incredibly flexible, it's very lightweight, and it's ideal for making small to medium-sized applications, APIs, and for situations where you want to understand exactly what's happening under the hood. It's also the stepping stone that many developers take before they move on to larger frameworks like Django. Now, what makes Flask special is its simplicity and extensibility. You start with just a basic web server and a few lines of code, and then you can add the features only when you need them, like databases, user authentication, file uploads, etc. These come through extensions. Now, this means that your app stays lean and you maintain full control over the entire architecture. So let me show you a quick example of building a Flask application so you can see what it looks like. So I'm back on the computer here, and I want to show you a demo now of what Flask looks like. Again, I won't go through a full tutorial. I just want to show you what the code looks like so you can see the difference. So this is the finished application, and it looks pretty similar to what we had in Streamlit. Same thing, I can add some to-do list items. You can see medium priority kind of gets added here. I can do something like, walk the dog. Let's go to high priority and add that. And then you see that it gets added here. I can check those off, and then I get the statistics showing up on the screen. So pretty much the exact same application, but you're going to see here, this requires quite a bit more code to build in Flask because we really have full control and we're using a traditional web framework. So let's go back here and let me show you. So when you work with Flask, this is a more traditional web framework, which means you do need to understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build interactive websites. What you can do in Flask is you can create these different routes which can handle the different data, and then these routes can pass data to something called a template, which you can render on screen. So for example, I have this endpoint here called add to do. This is what my front end, so the HTML that you just saw, will call when we want to add a new to-do item. Whereas in Streamlit, we just did it kind of directly inside of the user interface. Here, the user interface and the backend, so what's actually handling all of the data, are kind of somewhat separated. Same thing here if we have this to-do toggle, something we can call to toggle a to-do item, deleting a to-do item, clearing the completed items, and then something like getting the statistics, okay? And if we go here to this route, which is the index route, what this does is it renders a template. So we have different operations, rendering a user interface, and then kind of handling some type of backend operation, which is actually changing the data that will be passed to our template. I know it's a bit confusing, but look at our render template. We're passing in the to-dos, so the items that we're storing here, and then these different functions are kind of modifying the to-do items that we have. Now, this is all interesting. This is kind of the Flask framework in action. It's about 80 lines of code here, right, to handle this website. However, check out what happens when we go to our templates. So in Flask, you can create these things called templates. They're pretty much just HTML files, but they have some special code inside of them that allows them to get variables from the Flask application and put them on screen. So you can see here that I have my title, I have a bunch of CSS to make my website look good, right? And then I have my traditional HTML. But inside of here, I have this templating language called Django. Now, this is a special language that's used within Flask and Django to interact with the Flask web framework and render kind of Python values directly in your HTML code. So you can see here, this handles showing messages on the screen. If we come down here, this is kind of an HTML form for adding items. And then if we go further, we have again what looks kind of similar to Python code that we're using to render all of our to-do items on the screen. So again, it's not super complicated, but you need to now understand HTML, CSS, and learn this templating language, as well as kind of understand these web framework topics in order to work with Flask. but it's still relatively lightweight. We just have two single files, and if you just want a super simple website, you can spin that up. And also notice here that I have some script tags where I'm using some JavaScript. Now, if you want to learn more about Flask, I'll leave a full course on the screen right here that you can check out. Now, lastly, we move on to Django. This is the heavyweight champion of Python web frameworks. It's probably one that you've heard of before, and Django comes with literally everything that you need to build full professional production-ready websites right out of the box. Now we're talking about user authentication, admin panels, database management, security features, and a lot more. Django has a lot of stuff, and it follows the batteries included philosophy. This means that you don't have to hunt for a ton of third-party packages for common functionality. Now it handles the complex stuff automatically while providing powerful tools for customizing when you need them. Now this framework powers some of the world's largest websites that you've definitely heard of, like Instagram, Pinterest, and the Washington Post. Now if you're building anything that's more complicated, that's going to have a lot of accounts, content management, e-commerce, social media features, then Django is definitely what you want to go with. Now, it's definitely intimidating, especially at first, but once you understand the patterns and the architecture, you'll be amazed at how quickly you can build some really sophisticated applications. So let me give you a quick look into a Django application so you can see how it differs from something like Flask and Streamlit. So we're back on the computer and we're looking at Django. Now, similarly to before, I've built the exact same thing. In this case, you can see it looks identical to the previous one that we built with Flask, but this time I built it with Django. So notice we have our to-do items. I can check them off like this. I can delete them, so get rid of it like that, and then it gets removed. Sweet. So this is the application. Now let me show you what it looks like in code. Now remember, Django is a much more complicated web framework. It's capable of doing a lot more and has a lot more features built in. That's why we actually require all of this code you see on the left-hand side of my screen in order to build this really simple application. Whereas previously, we just had 1 or 2 files, now we have like 20 or 30 files in order to do the same thing. That's because we have things like URL mapping, where I can map different URLs into different independent applications. I have this entire to-do application, which is responsible for, well, the to-do app. If we look here, we have our URLs. All of these URLs are mapped to different views. So if I go to this view file, you can see that we have kind of a similar thing to what we had within Flask. And then again, similarly to what we had in Flask, we have these templates. This template is actually pretty much exactly the same as what we had inside of Flask, and that's because both Django and Flask use the same templating engine, which is that Jinga templating engine. So again, inside of Django, you need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make a fully functioning site, as well as, of course, the Django framework. The difference here is that it comes with a lot more features. For example, it already has things set up for like test cases. It has things for models and database management, which we didn't have out of the box with Flask. We would have had to set that up. We have different apps, so we can register an application and get things like an admin panel for our app. And actually, let me show you what that looks like. So by default, Django comes configured with this admin panel. So if you go to this /admin root, you'll be brought to a page like this where you can sign into an administration dashboard and start looking at all of the data that your application has. Now, I won't go into this right now, but the point is that it has all of these other features, and you can see there's all this other stuff going on. I have all these different settings and things that I can configure, like the middleware, the root URL configuration, the templating engine that I'm using, the database that I want to connect to, the authentication validators, and there's a lot more that we can do with Django that I haven't showed you in this short demo. So hopefully this is giving you a little bit of insight into how these different frameworks work. I'm just trying to show you that we have some really simple ways of making websites and some slightly more complicated ones. They all have their own use cases, and you should be familiar with each. And by the way, if you're looking for a tutorial to learn Django, I have an entire course on my channel, so I'll leave that on screen. Anyways, that's Django. Let's continue. So those are the 3 frameworks that are the easiest to use when it comes to building a website in Python. But I have one last honorable mention that's not technically focused on websites, but rather APIs. So you may have heard of this before. It's a framework called FastAPI. Now, if you're just looking to build a backend, okay, so just handling the logic, the data, authentication, for example, but you're not doing the front end, so all of the HTML, the CSS, the user interface, then definitely look into using FastAPI. It is the easiest and best way to make an API in Python. That's my opinion, but I use it literally all the time, and it can automatically document the APIs for you and handle things like data validation very, very easily. So just to be clear here, the 3 frameworks I mentioned earlier can do everything. So they can build the user interface and the backend. They can deal with the data, user authentication, etc. Whereas FastAPI purely deals with the backend. So when you use FastAPI, you're not usually spinning up a front end, so the thing you actually look at in your web browser, you're just dealing with the backend and the data. Anyways, I wanted to mention it because I know a lot of you are going to ask about it. All right, so there you have it. Those are 3 fantastic ways to build websites with Python, and each has its own strength. Choose Streamlit if you're working with data, need to create quick prototypes, or you want to build an interactive dashboard without touching a ton of web technologies. It's perfect for data scientists, researchers, and anyone who wants to turn simple Python scripts into shareable web applications. Again, not designed for anything too complex. Next, you can go with Flask if you want to learn web development fundamentals, you need a lightweight solution, or you prefer having full control over your application structure. It's excellent for APIs, small to medium-sized web applications, and developers who like to understand how everything works. And then lastly, you can pick Django when you're building something substantial. User-driven websites, content management systems, e-commerce platforms, or any application that needs robust authentication, admin interfaces, and a ton of other features. This is the professional choice for serious web applications and what a lot of companies use. Now, the best part here is that you don't just have to use one of these. Many developers start with Streamlit, for example, move on to Flask to learn the web concepts, and then they take on bigger projects with Django. And I know that's what I do all the time. Each framework teaches you a ton of valuable skills, and you can transfer those over to the others. Now, of course, there are many other Python frameworks that you could use. These are simply the 3 easiest, in my opinion, and the most popular to use. So make sure you check them out if you're trying to build websites in Python. And remember, I have full guides on each of them linked in the description down below. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.